Yes, I am.
Great. Well, welcome everybody. I'm sorry I wasn't around for the schmooze, but now my blood pressure can go down since I'm online. Nice to see everybody. Ruthie, I talked about the Bratslav Hasidim yesterday, but I know you were busy doing something very important. And I just mentioned that Connie's son, is he the younger or the two or the older? I don't
The
actually know.
younger of the two.
He's the younger. Connie has two kids, an older girl who's a secular Israeli, and the younger son, the younger child, is a,
This is who they are.
they represent Israeli society. Connie's daughter is secular legamre, completely like Yael grew up, completely, really almost hostile to religion. And
Not
Connie's,
almost.
not almost, right? I was trying to be pleasant,
Too close.
but Connie's son, Connie's son is Bratslav Chassid, like the most religious and the most ultra Orthodox, lives in Tiberias with, how many kids do they have, he and his wife?
Well, they have 12
Children.
10 are married, one left the fold, one is still home. They have Kanahara 38 grandchildren.
38 grandchildren.
So far. So far.
Yeah.
What I would like to say.
And Connie's daughter has one kid, right?
No, two.
Oh, two. I'm not
One
caught
is
up.
30 and one is 8.
So two kids, but very secular, wears clothing
Very-
like an Israeli secular woman would wear clothing, and Connie's son wears clothing like a Bratslav Chassid in Tiberias. Ruthie and Connie are so funny. When they would go visit them, they would just bring a lot of underwear because they couldn't even keep track of the kids. You just bring a lot of underwear and socks and just distribute it when you have that many children running around the house. I love that story.
They're beautiful.
But I got to tell you something, and Ruthie knows this obviously. And some of you, Judy Hollander was for sure on that trip to Israel. The Bratslav Chassid guy would come down from Tiberias and meet with us and see and loved his mother and very respectful to Ruthie. Still, and came to the funeral, of course, from Israel to the funeral, is always very respectful to me. I've met him many times. Lovely, lovely person. You have to be very careful about the assumptions you make, right? And some of us I know in this room have secular or reformed children who don't talk to them. So we can't make assumptions about, somebody looks like an ultra-Orthodox and is how they're going to be about, right, Ruthie?
Well, when he first found out about us, and it was my 50th birthday, and he wanted to bless us, he called us Lebanese. He didn't know how to say. By the way, Breslov is extraordinary. We should study him a little.
Well, when we get to Psalm number 16, what I mentioned yesterday is that they have what they call the Tikkun HaKlali, which is like the general repair or something. I'm not sure how to translate that exactly. Tikkun HaKlali, which are 10 Psalms that they, as I mentioned yesterday, that they consider to have particular mystical power when they are read together. And that's a very traditional Bratslav thing. And so when the first one is 16, so when we get to 16, we'll talk about them and we'll talk about the Tikkun HaKlali. And Ruthie, yesterday I mentioned a book that was done by a modern rabbi, which took these 10 Psalms and each Psalm and invited a contemporary rabbi to write like a reflection, meditation on each of those Psalms. And it's not a big book, paperback, and it's from the 90s. It's not a recent book, but Simcha Weintraub edited it. And it's a lovely way to take this tradition of the Bratslav Hasidim and bring it into a contemporary. But when we get to 16, we've got a little ways to go.
I found it on Amazon. I ordered it yesterday.
Yeah, it's a very sweet, and it's beautiful. It's not big, so it doesn't, and there's one essay for each Psalm. It's not dense, it's not a complicated, and the Psalms, as I said yesterday, are not the Psalms, if you sat down and say, okay, which 10 Psalms would I pick to be my Tikkun HaKlali? And they're not the ones I would pick, but they're the ones and when we get there, that's one of the issues. If you were to create for yourself a little book of the Psalms that are the ones you want to turn to in times of crisis, what would they be? And maybe when we finish 150, you'll all have an opinion. We should all live in peace.
I'd just like to share one thing.
Yes, Bubala.
Rabbi Breslov There is a book called The Tormented Master about him.
Yes.
Intimates that he was a gay man.
I actually assume he was a gay man.
And the Breslov are not permitted to read the book.
I have a lot to say about that book because the writer of that book was one of my very important teachers in rabbinical school. So I actually have a lot of good stories, but maybe we'll save them for when I'll do a whole little presentation about these Hasidim, and I'll save some of those stories. But yes, it's a fantastic book. It's a, what do you call that? A psycho-spiritual biography of the Bratslav Rebbe called The Tormented Master by Arthur Green in English. He lived with the Bratslav Hasidim who are in Jerusalem and became very, very, very close to them. They are not happy with the book, but it's definitely worth reading if you're interested in and it's a fantastic book if you like to read about Jewish things. If you want to read about an area you don't know anything about, and I tell you, you don't know anything about this, it's really, and he's a contemporary theologian and writer, so it's a very interesting book. And Bratslav was known to be full of what they call melancholy, which I love that word, and I think in contemporary words we would say he was clinically depressed. And as a result, he developed a theology that was all about joy, which is a very interesting thing, that his struggle in life was to deal with his, what we would call, as I said now, depression, but they called melancholy. And and as a result, he's developed a very interesting theology. He had a very interesting theology. And as I mentioned yesterday, when he died, his Hasidim did not replace him. So they're called the Dead Hasidim. Not because they don't have a living Rebbe. And that's a feature of Hasidic life, is to have a Rebbe. They don't. They have leaders of the community, but they don't have a Rebbe who inherited the dynasty in the same way. A small aside about them, which we'll also, when we get to Psalm 16, is that many think that they're responsible for some of the worst spreading of some of the coronavirus, because they go to Umam, a town in Ukraine, and we think that it might have been they brought it back to Israel, who then brought it to the United States also. So they have a lot of, it's a very complicated, these things are always complicated. Anyway, if you want to read The Tormented Master, somebody said, and it's not a bad idea, that maybe we should do a book club, and I could kind of pick some of my favorite books, tell you to read them, and like every other month we could have a discussion, because you know what I mean? So it wouldn't be, but it would kind of be, I'll tell you a book that I love, you read it, and then we have a discussion. What do you think about something like that, And we wouldn't meet as often as like the Psalms class. It would just be once a month, once every other month. And I would talk about we could, I don't have that much additional time, but what do you think about something like that? If you like that idea, let me know. And people could do it or not do it. And anyway, but our book for today, the Psalms. By the way, I also want to give a shout out. Was it Linda and Dorothy who decided to join the class after Psalm 27 or during Psalm 27? And they dedicated themselves to listening to every single one of our recorded sessions to catch up. If you're on the class now, would you identify yourself? Who told me this? And they listened to 2 classes a day to catch up so that they could join today. Who is on
Linda and I did that.
Yeah, Linda and Dorothy. So fantastic. How fantastic that is.
Here's a little, I guess, caveat to that. We did every single class, except unfortunately we had to skip people's individual
readings. That makes sense. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get a chance to read them all. We're collecting them all in writing, and you could read those. But
I just wanted to say one other thing about that. We felt like we knew some of you before we got here. It was great, and we would say to each other, "We've got to finish this so we can really join."
Well, that's great, Dorothy. Wonderful to have you. And Dorothy, where do you guys live again? Just remind me. Are you
in Maynard, Massachusetts? It's 30 miles west of Boston.
Maynard?
Small town. Maynard.
Sharon, Massachusetts?
Yeah, maybe 20 miles.
Okay. I always like the towns that have my name. I have Natick or Maynard?
Maynard.
Maynard, Massachusetts. Okay. All right, so let's go back to Psalm 11.
Rabbi, I hate to
Nimi, hold on
interrupt.
just a second. Cantor Nimi, I need to hear, let's tell us how your Yontiv was.
We did very, very well. Actually, fortunately for us, all of the technology cooperated. We also hired somebody in a local videographer and who did all of our video editing work. We kind of did a hybrid, similar, I think, in some ways to what you all did, where it was mostly live, but we brought in some pre-recorded video,
Yep.
and we were broadcasting from the sanctuary. So it ended up working very well, and we've at least, not always, but I think at least occasionally managed to transcend the strangeness of our.
Yep. Great. Well, it's wonderful to see you again on the other side. It's quite a journey we all put together. So good to have you. Okay, Psalm 11. And what we're going to do today is finish up the first go through, and maybe even, well, we'll see. Let's start. And I think we're up to verse, did we get to 4? Did we do 4 or 5? I wanted to read you that verse, which of course I couldn't, where did I do this? Here it is. So the first bracha in Birchot HaShachar has that strange word that somebody asked me about, which means eyelid or eyelashes or something. What did we decide?
Eyelids.
So the first bracha of Birchot HaShachar, and there are some, as I said, most Hebrew, most Semitic roots are 3-letter roots. That's true in Arabic. It's true in Aramaic. But there are some 2-letter roots, which I've told you. But what I didn't tell you is that there are some 4-letter roots. Not a lot in Hebrew. There are some 4-letter roots, and they tend to be words that are. Oh God, what's that? What's the English? What's the word when something sounds like what it means?
Onomatopoeia.
There we go. Onomatopoeia. That it sounds like what it means. And come on, Bella. You gotta come in or come out. So it sounds like what it means. There are a few like that right now my mind is blank in Hebrew. Like, what's the word for water? Bakbuk, which is water coming down. Bakbuk, bakbuk, bakbuk. You can hear what it sounds like, right? Bakbuk, bakbuk. So the 4-letter roots. Bottle, but it's the sound of water coming out of it. So there are other 4-letter roots, which I'd have to think of, and maybe others of you here who can think of them. But one of them, and they tend to be these repeats of the 2-letter root, 2 letters, but the root is actually therefore the 4 letters, even though it's the repetition of 2. Is that clear? I feel very fuzzy this morning. Sorry. Which is this is a good bracha. So the first bracha of the morning prayers, of the morning blessings every single day. Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, Eloheinu cheholamim. This is from the our reconstructions machzor. Hama'avir sheina, who has removed. We express gratitude for removing from Hama'avir sheina me'enai, who has removed the sleep from my eyes. Utenuma me'afa pai, and the Tenuma. Sleepiness, slumber. Sleepiness. Me'afa pai, from my eyelids. So this is that word, and thank you to Debbie and Gary for. I knew I was going to look it up. I couldn't quite remember where it was. That it's every morning we say that from me'afa pai. So that's this 4-letter root. And for those of you in the advanced Hebrew, I could ask you, why is once pronounced af pai? The first one does not have a dagesh, and the second pei has a dagesh. So all of you think on that and see if you can come up with the answer to that. Okay, so that's what we have, afa pav. So we had his eyelids. Okay, so we're up to verse 5. And if you have questions or I'm not clear, put them in the chat, and when we pause, we'll take those questions, okay? All right, so we're up to 5. Yud He Vav He, repeating Yud He Vav He, which was the beginning of 4. So we have this repetition in the poem itself. Yud He Vav He Tzadik, Tzadik Yivchan. We have these words again. So Yud He Vav He Bochen is a exam or to examine or to investigate, to look deeply. So Yud He Vav He looks deeply, examines the tzaddik, or here it's seeks out into the tzaddik, the righteous, the just, justice. All those words are in tzaddik. V'rasha, again, we have the contrast. The word, one of those words for bad or evil, rasha, and the contrast to tzaddik. V'rasha, so Yud He Vav He seeks out the righteous man. We'll use this one for now. The righteous, the just. But what about the rasha? So the contrast, you could hear the emphasis in terms of reading. It doesn't start with the verb in the Hebrew. The emphasis is on the noun. But the wicked, the vi here is the contrast, not a conjunctive. It's like a disjunctive. It's but the wicked, the ohev Hamas, the wicked, what is the definition of wicked? Is the one who loves violence. Hamas means violence. Sana nafsho. Now, that's so interesting, right? Who is the sana nafsho? How would you translate sana nafsho? Hating, the hater, nafsho. So this is a contrast between what we would imagine the just and righteous, going always back to that original definition, or not definition, I hate that word, the original framework. The Psalm is always trying to get to what does a just life look like, and what does an evil or bad person life look like. And it's always about this question of who is increasing the holiness in the world and who is decreasing the holiness. And what are examples of increasing holiness and what are examples of decreasing holiness. We'll see that over and over and over again. Okay, so that was 5, right? So the lover of violence, sana nafsho, his soul hates. Okay, the his referring back to Yud He Vav He. Again, we're just doing this first treatment, so I'm not saying this is the final translation, this is the final way to understand. We're now laying the foundation for getting deeper into the Psalm. Okay, 6. Yamter al Rishaim. Now this goes back to, remember I said that traditionally in biblical language, in a very classical, the standard is going to be the verb starts a sentence. If a verb does not start a sentence, there's some kind of emphasis being made by the writer, which is hard for English speakers to understand because we do it in English the exact opposite, right? I walk the dog is the standard sentence. If I were writing that sentence in biblical Hebrew in a standard way, I would say, walk the dog I. That would be the standard, always starting with the verb. That's why for English speakers to approach the biblical text, it's often one of the things we have to overcome in our natural sense of, but if I were to say in English, since I say I walk the dog, you would barely even hear the sentence. You would just understand what it means. If I were to say, walk the dog I, all of a sudden there's emphasis. There's, wow, you're paying attention about walk the dog I, or the dog I walk. All of a sudden you hear, it's not that that sentence is wrong, but by saying the dog I walk, you hear it as, oh, what is that trying to tell me? There's something there. Maybe it's just rhythm. Maybe it's not about changing meaning, or maybe it's about trying to emphasize I'm not walking the cat. You know, if I say the dog I walk, maybe I'm trying to say I'm not walking the cat. Or I hope is everybody kind of getting that? So we're back to so that's why when we're saying Yud He Vav He starts a sentence, there's an emphatic to that. Wherever it's not a verb, there's some kind of emphatic into the biblical Hebrew, which Alter tries to represent, because Alter is always going back to trying to get into English as close to the Hebrew, and we're going to look at Alter. But Yamter al Rishaim. So this is a good word for this season. Yamter, what does Yamter mean? Some kind of relationship to rain. Al Rishaim, what is he going to rain down onto Rishaim? Pachim Eish. V'gafrit, well, this is really, so this is an image that what's going to happen to the evil ones, that the psalmist is telling us, don't worry. They might look like they are flourishing, but these bad things will happen. And by the way, this is where the phrase fire and brimstone comes from, even though this translation is a little different. When you hear the King James version of fire and brimstone, it gets used a few other places. So I'm not saying this particular psalm, but the phrase fire and brimstone, that's what this is. And some of you in your different translations might see fire and brimstone. Aish is fire. So this is fire and brimstone. The gafrit, veruach zelafot. Oh my goodness, this is this scorching wind. Minat kosam. So a mana is a portion, and kos is a cup, and kosam is their cup. So you can see this is shall be their lot, because a cup is seen as, that's often translated, but the literal, that's a kos, like kosi rivaya. My cup, when in Psalm 23 we say, my cup rivaya is full. It doesn't mean only my cup, literally, it means my portion in life is full of abundance. So this is, all right, 7. We're going to go through all of these because it's not so long, and then we'll take questions and comments, okay?
Rabbi, can I just make a
sure.
point? I think the word gofrit is with kamatz katan. It sounds like a on or a
Correct. Correct. You are correct. Thank you. Gofrit. Yes. 7. All right. Yeah, why don't you read Hebrew so we'll get you'll read it.
כי צדיק אדוני צדקות אהב, ישר יחזו פנימו.
Okay, so here key is because key functions as a conjunctive or an explanatory, or like it's definitely referring back to what we've just been reading. In some ways it's saying, and sometimes in modern Hebrew it can mean because or for or as a result of or something like that. Ki tzadik Yud He Vav He, because God is just. The Holy One is just. As much as you might see evil in the world, the force that has created the universe is ultimately just. And the word, the Shoresh Tzadi Dalid Kuf, is being repeated. Tzedakot, which is not a normal use of the Shoresh. But again, remember, Hebrew poetry, biblical poetry, loves to repeat a root in different forms. That is considered beautiful because you hear it in your ear in a kind of a rhythm, it has energy to it. It has a rhythm. Tzedakot ahev, justice, or just, here it's translated as righteous deeds. Ahev, love. Now ahev here, Aleph He Vav, is contrasting. We just heard about hate, that God hated the evil acts in an earlier verse. Love, here's love, like v'ahavta and ahavat olam. We have the word love as a deep connection to God, because God loves righteousness, yashar. So yashar again translates often as straight, but not in sexual orientation terms, but in direct or honest or true. So the true ones or the honest ones or upright. Yechazu fanemo. So that's an interesting structure, because panim is the face, so God's face. And remember, we'll see over and over again the sense of being in God's presence, or feeling the presence of the power of the creator of the universe, is often in language of experiencing the face of God, or the face of that creator. Okay, verse 8, the 7 is it, right? So that's the conclusion. All right, let's go back to comments, questions, or anything for those. So this is a pretty short psalm. So in Psalm 7 is kind of all right, let's go back. Let's see, I see we have a few hands up. Yeah, El, will you call on people so you can see better than I can?
Sure, let's start with Ben Shafran.
Morning. And verse 5.
Say again. Yeah, it's hard to hear you, Ben.
Verse 5.
Okay, verse 5.
Yeah.
Yep.
Which refers back to
It's very hard to hear you, Ben. Is your mic, are other people having trouble? Yeah. Can't hear you, Ben.
Ben, maybe you can put it in the chat and I can read it.
Yeah, there's something wrong with the mic today.
come back to me. I'll check the mic.
Okay, thank you. All right, who else?
Cantor Nimi.
I wanted to make a brief note about, I think it was verse 6. I was noting that sometimes this translation is interpretive with the way that it puts the sentence structure. So I was looking at the Hebrew, and the word that has the greatest degree of pause on is actually the word pachim. Right now it's saying that it will rain upon them fire and brimstone, but really it should be, he will rain down upon them fire and brimstone, and such will be their lot. Connected to the fire and brimstone is actually connected to the next phrase, if you follow the accent marks.
Yep, that's
Now,
fantastic.
again, we know that translators can make their own decisions about whether or not they want to follow those, but I just wanted to point that out, that this is actually being interpretive.
And that's why we want to say over and over again, every translation is an interpretation, and we're not offering one as, and I'm not endorsing and saying, oh, this is the one. And honestly, as I keep saying, the best way to get to the meaning of the psalm is to look at many different attempts and to kind of develop a prism of a range of understanding for each word, and then you'll start to get closer and closer to something. But it's, yeah, thank you for that. I'm just looking at what, yeah, that's line 5 you're saying, or is that 4? 5?
I think it was 6, actually.
6.
Maybe I'm
Yep,
mistaken.
and that's exactly what alter does, what you're saying, Jacob. Yeah.
So just the impact that punctuation can have.
Yeah. Yeah, so alter does, he rains fiery coals on the wicked, comma, sulfur and gale winds their lot.
Ben, do you want to try again?
You hear me now?
Yes.
And verse 5. End of the verse ends on sure.
I'm still having a hard time understanding you, Ben. Sorry. Maybe somebody else can tell me. Maybe it's me.
Yeah, no, it's hard to hear.
I'll put it in the chat.
Put it in the chat. Yeah,
okay,
I can
great.
hear every other word.
Okay, Sol Zalkin.
So I've been morning, Rabbi. So I've been reciting verse 10, Psalm 10 every day, which remember was about the wicked who don't believe that God will. At any time, were these two Psalms one? Does anybody think that they're really one? Because they're talking about the same thing.
Let's see what, not that I know of, but let me look at alter. Is alter 10 and 11? Let's see. Alter doesn't say so,
Okay.
but this is interesting. In the Septuagint, it's numbered as Psalm 10. But I don't know if that means that Psalm 10 is numbered differently in the Septuagint. We're going to need Harold to investigate.
Harold. Okay. Thank you.
But you know, a lot of the Psalms have a lot of the same themes, but we don't, and you can, and maybe they were one once. We don't, there's no, it sounds like I don't see any evidence quickly to say it does, but that doesn't mean it doesn't. Yeah. Anything else?
So Ben's question is this. He's interested in knowing in Pasuk 5,
Yeah.
the reference to the word nafsho for Hashem, right?
Yeah.
It says san'a nafsho. Can you talk about that?
I don't know that. I find that interesting too. I'd have to do some research about if there are other references like that. I noticed that too, Ben. I think that's interesting. It's not, it might not be rare, but it is definitely unusual. But again, as I said, nafsho doesn't have the sense only of soul in biblical Hebrew, so it might just be a more normal way of saying, to refer to the wholeness of the person. Like, yeah, Sarah just wrote God's self, I see. But it struck me too in reading this morning. But just remember, it doesn't just mean soul. So, but it's interesting. It's an interesting reference. I'm ready to go.
Doug Susan Worset is next.
Thank you. Why are we told in line 7, and there are other, I believe, Psalms, but I can't remember, or other places, that the upright shall behold God's face? Because what strikes me so much from the Torah is that those of us who see God's face will not live, except for Moses. And I just wonder why to me, that's like a 180-degree turn.
Right. It in general, it doesn't mean it in the way that Moses and the experience of Devarim, which we'll read, by the way, right, when we end the book of Devarim. It means this sense of being in the presence of. So lifnei, for instance, even the word lifnei, which means, or mipnei, has the word for face in it, right? Lifnei has the word for face. Lifnei means to be before somebody. But it actually has the word face in it, and it means the sense of being in somebody's presence. So sometimes in the Bible, it also means that. Presence. It means the idea of whether you're experiencing God through God's presence or God's absence. One of the ways that biblical Hebrew refers to it is to be in God's presence, meaning in God's face. But it's different than when we hear about Moses being the only one who saw God literally face to face. So it's confusing, but it's often used to mean this concept of being in the presence. And I keep saying, as distinct from being in the absence, which is also an experience of God. And it's kind of that rock bottom description that Dave Yadid beautifully described in his drash, for those of you who heard it on the second night of Rosh Hashanah. In recovery language, being rock bottom is experiencing God's absence. And that's very powerful. But we'll see it a lot.
This if they chose that, I don't know, that metaphor.
Yeah, but you'll see that, yeah.
Sherry Dratfield.
Yes, I was struck by, I didn't realize that Hamas meant violence. And I was wondering if in Arabic it also means violence. And even if it doesn't, that must have great connotations for Israelis under any circumstances.
Sure it does.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it does mean violence, though I'm not really sure. I'm not an Arabic speaker. Do we have any Arabic speakers here? Somebody could probably Google it. Hamas are not nice people. I mean, it's not like we're talking about a moderate political party in the Palestinian world. You know, a friend of mine, well, we won't go into the whole story about Hamas, but I think it is related to violence. But maybe somebody could Google, what does Hamas mean in Arabic?
Simon's doing that now.
Okay. Yes. And Hamas is used all the word Hamas for violence is used in Hebrew all the time. I mean, it's in modern Hebrew, and it's a standard word.
He'll put it in the chat.
It's an acronym. It's an acronym for Islamic Resistance Movement. Courage. It means courage and zeal.
Okay.
But I think it's not a coincidence that the acronym reads Hamas.
Yeah.
Even if that's not the exact translation of the movement.
Well, they say courage and zeal, strength and bravery.
All right, well, that's not our conversation for today, but it is an interesting word. Okay, what's next? Do we have other people? I want to make sure we get as many people who want to.
There are no other hands raised.
Okay. No, and everybody knows how to raise your hands, right? So we can we can see people. Good. Okay, so this psalm is, we now have a short one, but can you describe, and can we put it back on the screen? Can we get all 7 verses up there? How would you describe the arc of this psalm? So look at, if we can get the psalm, so look at the overall arc. It's 7 verses. How would we describe the verse? So what do you see? So we see, anybody want to take a stab at that?
I can't see raised hands.
Has her hand up.
So
I wasn't going to talk about the whole arc. I was just going to go back to verse 4, though, when we were talking about seeing God's face, looking at this line of God is searching us, and I find that really powerful. This idea that the foundations are being destroyed. So here, so that is part of the arc, I guess. The first 3 are this description.
Yeah.
And the 4th verse is this idea that God is searching us for how we are dealing with this foundation crumbling.
Yeah.
And God is seeking out righteousness and hating the wicked.
Great. Michael Goldstein, I see you're.
Yeah, thank you. For me, it's just all about the 3rd verse where you said the fulcrum sentence, when the foundations are destroyed, what can the righteous man do? So in verse 1 and 2, we're hearing about foundations being destroyed, wicked people and shooting from shadows at the upright. And then the 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the solution. His throne is in heaven. He's a righteous man. The wicked one who loves injustice will be hated. There will be blazing coals and sulfur. A scorching wind shall be their portion in life. And the Lord is righteous. He loves righteous deeds. And the honest shall behold his God's power of the Creator.
Beautiful.
Very clear arc to me.
Yeah, great. More folks?
Rabbi, do you want to call people?
Oh, yeah, now I can see the name. Yeah, Sherry Dratfield.
Yeah, well, in looking for the ark, in that first verse, I'm a little confused because for me the ark is, in the beginning you have this sense of the foundations being destroyed in the first 3 and then, or in the 2 and 3, and then in the midst of this you have this place of holiness, and in 4 and 5 I lost it. Where is it? And then you're back to bringing in the wicked again. It sort of goes up and down, and of course at the end is. But let me ask about the first verse, because I wonder, is it the Lord saying, "Take to the hills like a bird," or in the Lord I take refuge? How can you say to me, "Take to the hills"? And it's a little you. So it doesn't seem like it's God telling him to take to the hills in fright and fear to save himself.
Excellent, Sherry. A lot of the traditional commentators read it that way. I think it's ultimately not totally clear, but a lot of people read it that way, that the you is kind of the enemies. It's like, say, a lot of people read it as, for instance, if I were to read it, that I feel trust, then to my evil friends or people who are saying to me, "Oh, take to the hills." I don't need to take to the hills because I have this sense of confidence. That's the traditional way of reading this. I'm not sure if that's the only way to read it, but that is, you've hit the nail on the head there.
Okay. So go ahead. Oh, that's it. That's all. I just see it's so interwoven. So it starts with this tumult and the foundations being destroyed. But then you come back to this place of calm and rest and peace with God and, with the holiness. And then of course it reverts. Maybe it doesn't revert, but it just casts no doubt where God stands on wickedness. Okay.
So it'll be interesting for you to look at Fisher and to see, because I think Fisher does some very exciting things with this psalm. Okay.
Rabbi, I want to point out it's 10:44. I don't know if you want to
maybe
continue.
one more person. Can we get one more person in there who hasn't spoken today? Who hasn't spoken today? Nina Lubin.
Thank you, Rabbi. The arc of Psalm 11 seems to be a straight on through trust and faith and belief in God.
Yeah.
There's no doubt in this psalmist's mind that God will take care of this psalmist's enemies, even to the point of if all of those archers are down below, ready to unleash their arrows, God will pour fire and brimstone down on their heads. It's utter faith and trust. And I just, in my head, contrast that to Psalm 27, which starts strong, but then finally, please help, please show your face, just your face. That's all, just a little bit, help me out.
Don't leave me. Yep. There's a sense of, beautiful.
The contrast there. The Psalms are the range is enormous. And I think it touches on so many modern thoughts about God in this world. And do we perceive or not? Thank you.
And I think to add to that, I agree with you. To add to that, I agree that this psalm has that power to it. But it's also important to see that the psalm is talking about the foundations being destroyed. It's not a moment of great... the world feels very much at risk in this psalm, but the faith is very strong for this particular psalmist. Yeah. All right, so we will continue on Monday. We'll start going, I think we're going to look at Fisher first, or I'm not sure which we'll look at. I'll read them all this weekend. But we're going to start looking at all the different, how different people have struggled with this psalm and the questions and the responses and the problems you've all raised. You'll see everybody's dealing with the same things. So I'm going to talk to Rabbi Rapport about scheduling. And I found out I was wrong about Hebrew classes. Hebrew classes are starting November 2nd when Lair House begins. That'll probably go out next week. And there will be an advanced class for Siddur Hebrew, taking the Siddur text and using that to study grammar. For those who are at that level, there'll be we're going to repeat the pre-Aleph level for people who've never learned Aleph Bet to see if we still have people who want that. And then we'll have the people who have learned the Aleph Bet, the Bet class, and Rabbi Rapport is putting it'll all go out hopefully next week. And we'll have other classes.
Rabbi, is there still going to be an intermediate class, or is it just going to be beginning and advanced?
No. There'll also be a Bet Plus class. Basically, if you were in Bet, there's going to be a class for the Bet Plus, for basically the next level of the Bet. I'm not sure how we're calling these classes yet. I'm making it up. But yes, if you were in Bet, if you were in Aleph, there'll be kind of an Aleph Plus. And then if you were in Bet, there'll be a Bet Plus. But we're also going to do another Aleph for people if there's enough interest in that. And then there'll be an advanced class to take the prayers of Friday night. We're going to use B'chol Levavcha, our CBS, and Rabbi Rapport is going to teach that and really study grammar, looking at the prayer book. And then next semester, there'll be a biblical Hebrew class for that level. Biblical
Thank you.
Okay? All right, my friends. So I'll see you tomorrow night in services. It is the beginning of Sukkot. And see you tomorrow night, 6:30. Looking forward to it. And then Monday morning, we're back here.
Before you leave, Rabbi, do you know anything about the book that Harold sent out an email last night with
I don't have to, unfortunately, I don't have time right now. I have to get onto another Zoom. I think Harold explained it, but I don't have time right now. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Harold an email. Okay, sorry about that. I have
Is Julie Rain a god?
Bye-bye,
Julie,
everybody.
Lamb of God.
The Zoom room will stay open for a few minutes, but unfortunately I have to get to another Zoom.
Julie.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Julie, where's Julie?
I'm right here.
Your interpretation of Psalm 27 has haunted me because that was the connection that I had with my father. And it really, really hit me in my heart. And I didn't stop thinking about it for days. Thank you for it. And I look forward to getting a copy of it. And you're blessed to have that piece of paper that your father wrote Psalm 27 on. That is a real gift from him. My father didn't leave me anything. And I cried when I saw that piece of paper. And I've wanted to tell you that since that day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I miss seeing you at the high holidays.
Thank you. Thank you.
Annika, did you get my email yesterday? Oh, she left. Okay.
I don't think she's on, Linda.
Sue, are you back in the city?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
I don't see you when I walk by.
I really very rarely go on 9th Avenue, except at night because 20th Street has become dangerous at 11 o'clock at night. So I walk on 9th Avenue. But there are too many people not wearing masks on 9th Avenue. So I stay on 20th Street during the day.
What's on 20th Street at night?
There are drug dealers. There are, right?
Okay.
It's just, it's not safe anymore.
Okay.
There've been a couple of people.
I can see their point, you know, like if you're dealing coke or heroin or something, what's the point of wearing a mask?
Right.
Well,
my puppy got into crystal meth and almost died.
Oh, ouch.
Yeah, it's not been a good couple of months with me and dogs. If you remember last week, I came to this class just about as it was ending. I had put my dog Reuben down and made it back to make this class. And a month before that, my puppy, who was 11 months old, got into crystal meth. And I have a $12,000 vet bill, which most of it's covered by insurance, or a lot of it. But when I picked him up, the vet said to me, "You're very lucky because most dogs don't make it out." It's all over the city. Since the pandemic, nobody's cleaning anything anymore. The garbage cans are just on every corner. Sue, have you noticed they're all overflowing? Because they don't come by and empty them anymore. The city has just, and the police are useless. They don't stop anybody. There are cars with mufflers, missing mufflers, that make so much noise that they wake me up, and they're just going down every street, and the police aren't stopping them. They don't care. It's a quality of life issue. They don't deal with those. It's sad. It's really sad. But that's the joy of living in Manhattan. How many of you are in Manhattan? Dorina, you're going to come to Manhattan soon. We're going to get you here. We're going to get you here.
May I ask a question? There was something, Annika posted something about submissions go to such and such an email. Submissions for what?
When you write, when you have an interpretation.
When you write a copy.
When you interpret the psalm the way you see it, and you write it, that goes to Harold or Annika.
Annika. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So this is like like if people are doing them for Psalm 11, or if you have one from before that you haven't sent in?
Correct.
Thank you.
All right, I gotta go to work, which I don't want to do. So I'll see you around the hood. I gotta make it to Rite Aid to get a flu shot. I haven't been able to walk that far yet.
You should call them first. I mean, just call.
Make sure they'll
Why?
have one for you.
Well,
make sure they'll have. Sometimes they run out. I don't know about
Right.
Rite Aid, but the
I
pharmacies
mean, they
where I
had.
live, sometimes they run
I
out.
was there yesterday. I got the senior flu shot there yesterday, but like I had called Gristides where I usually go, and they were out of the senior flu shot. So, I mean, I think you could probably do it today. They had them yesterday morning, but you might just want to call to just make sure they have what you need.
Last year, I
Thanks so
was
much.
able to make it to Rite Aid on October the 1st. That was the furthest I had walked. If Billy's has the benches out in front, I can walk to Billy's, sit, then get up and go to Rite Aid.
Right. If it's that much trouble, you might want to make sure they're holding a shot for you.
Yeah. Well, there are other things I can pick up while I'm there. If they had it yesterday, they'd have it today.
I mean,
You're muted. So you're muted.
Probably. I mean, probably, but
I've never had
I
a problem
called
getting
first
it
just to
there.
be sure, because
No, maybe I'll do that.
I had to like call around a number of places and dash down. I mean, I was trying to get the senior flu shot, which I haven't gotten before, and it made me sick for 3 days with flu symptoms. So I don't know if I'll do that again. But but to try to get that one was not easy where I live.
Where do you live?
Where I live too, the drugstore I usually go to did
In Massachusetts.
The C5 plus
Outside
one is
Boston.
what you want, and I was fine.
Yeah, I'm fine. I had it yesterday.
I had it
Where in
last week.
Massachusetts?
Waltham.
Where I
Waltham,
spent my summers.
Massachusetts.
I spent my summers in Marblehead and Swampscott.
He's north of Boston. I'm west.
Right. You know Cappy's Liquors?
Yeah.
That's my family. Those are the rich people. We were the poor people. But they're the nicest people you'll ever want to meet.
Well, liquor is a business that does well in a depression.
Yes.
Probably did
except
really
that-
well after those debates also.
Well, right now they have a lot of competition. But I'll see you guys on Monday. Shabbat Shalom. Dorina,
Shabbat
I'll see you.
Shalom.
Come to the community meeting tomorrow at 3:00. It's wonderful. Come to it. It's worth it. All right? Shabbat Shalom. Bye, Babette.
Bye. Someone's leaving. Bye. Oh, 1 o'clock.